at Montclair State University, and I am teaching a course titled Audio Description this semester. Actually, it's every Thursday from 5:30 to 8, so we are right here in the classroom, and I have the students in front of me in person and connecting some of them to the computers right now. It is really exciting to be here tonight. Today we start a module titled Creative or Alternative Media Access, audio description. So we couldn't think of anyone more qualified to talk about this field than our speaker tonight, Pablo Romero-Fresco. And you will find out why I say that we couldn't find anyone more qualified for that. It is a pleasure to see not only my students, but also other students in other disciplines, colleagues from other departments, anthropology, film study. Hi, Judy, how are you? All of them doing so many things, fantastic things, creatively thinking about accessibility and inclusion. So this is really exciting. Even though we had to change the Zoom link at the very last moment, I am glad to see that we still have an audience and the attendees got the Zoom link on time. That's fantastic. The timeline of the event is going to be the following. I'm going to say a few words about the speaker, about our guest, Pablo Romero-Fresco, and then I'm going to pass the floor to him. He's going to do a 4-minute audio introduction to give us some context about the documentary. And then I'm going to provide you with the link of the video in Vimeo. Some of you already have it. And the password, we are going to put it in the chat. So everybody can watch the documentary on their own, because we were doing some testing. And when we shared the screen with the documentary, the image was breaking and the audio was not reliable. So we want to make sure that you guys have the best experience ever tonight. So this is why we are going to share the link and the password. So we can put that on the chat. The link is on the chat and the password is going to be DALM, like D as in David, capital letters, everything. D as in David, A as Apple, L like Lawrence, M like Montclair. So I'm gonna watch the documentary, which is 1 hour. And then after the documentary, we are coming back to the Zoom session for the Q&A. So what I'm gonna do here in the classroom, we're gonna have the Zoom session always open, but of course muted and with no video, and you guys can do the same thing. And then, of course, we have the Q&A. So let me say a few words about our special guest. Pablo Romero-Fresco is senior lecturer at Universidad de Vigo, Spain, and honorary professor of translation and filmmaking at the University of Roehampton, London, UK. He is the author of the books Subtitling Through Speech Recognition, Re-Speaking, Routledge, Accessible Filmmaking, published by Routledge, and Transformative Media Accessibility, also forthcoming in Routledge. He's on the editorial board of the Journal of Audiovisual Translation and is the leader of the international research group GALMA, Galician Observatory for Media Access, for which he's currently coordinating several international projects on media accessibility and accessible filmmaking, and where he works as a consultant for institutions and companies such as the European Parliament or Netflix. Pablo is also a filmmaker. His first short documentary, Joining the Dots, 2012, was used by Netflix as well as film schools around Europe to raise awareness about audio description. He has just released his first feature-length documentary, Where Memory Ends, 2021, which has been selected for the London Spanish Film Festival and the Seminci in Spain. I have to give thanks to Pablo, not only for being here and making time for us, but also for being so accommodating. I don't know if you know that in Spain, he's in Spain, and in Spain now it's 11:30 p.m. And he didn't want to change the time. He wanted to accommodate to our class schedule. So that's tremendously generous from him. And also I have to say a special thanks also to him, because when we planned this event 2 months ago, we couldn't use the audio description that was created initially for this movie. So of course, since we wanted to show the screening with the audio description, Pablo said, no worry, Maria Jose, I will create an audio description for April the 13th for your event. So he committed himself to such an endeavor, and he did it in time record. So I have to say thank you so much for all the hours behind that work and for the effort. And now, without further ado, I leave you with our honored speaker, Pablo Romero-Fresco.
Well, thank you very much, Maria Jose. Thank you very much. It's really exciting to be here, and thanks everyone for taking the time to be here and to watch the film. I really appreciate that. So what I'll do, well, first of all, we did have an audio description for the film, but it was kind of a standard audio description, which is really what the distributor asked me, almost forced me to do, if you like. But I really wanted to try something else. So if we have failed, then I'll be very happy to hear your feedback about it. It doesn't have to be good. And like I said, we're just experimenting here with something a little bit different to a traditional, conventional audio description. So, like I said, Maria Jose, thank you very much for supporting this kind of venture. And if you think it's a good idea, what I can do is I can read the audio introduction, kind of read it live. I don't think it'll take 4 minutes, hopefully less than that. And then we can move on to watching the film and then having some discussion, which is really what I'm looking forward to. It's taken about 10 years to make the film from many different reasons, which now I'm thinking that, as you were mentioning, Johnny Dots was 2012. 10 more years for this one. I only have 3 more films in me, really. Not much more than that. So I'm going to have to not take so long anyway. So here we go, Maria Jose and everyone. I'm going to read and then we start. This is the audio introduction to Donde Acaba la Memoria, Where Memory Ends, a documentary film directed by me, Pablo Romero-Fresco. It runs for 70 minutes, but before it starts, I would like to spend a couple of minutes giving you some background information about what inspired me, who appears in the film, and how it's been put together. In 1933, the famous and possibly infamous Spanish filmmaker Luis Buñuel traveled to Las Urdes, an isolated and desperately impoverished region in central Spain, to make what became a landmark documentary that was called Land Without Bread. 85 years later, Ian Gibson, that is a literary detective originally from Ireland, who's devoted his life to recovering the recent memory of Spain in writing the biographies of 3 of its most recognized geniuses, Buñuel, painter Dali, and poet Federico García Lorca. Ian Gibson made the same journey to complete the work of a lifetime. And this is what the film is about. It's about Ian Gibson and his kind of lifetime work. The film started when I met Ian and his friend, the legendary English documentary filmmaker Mike Dibb. They are like a Quixote and Sancho, determined to go on their final adventure, following in the footsteps of Buñuel, and, as you will be able to see, risking life and limb to climb up a famous cliff that was in Land Without Bread in Buñuel's documentary. Of course, the initial plan was to revisit Buñuel's landmark documentary. That was it. But it soon became evident that Ian Gibson was, for me, the story that I wanted to pursue. Where Memory Ends is something of a road trip, as we, that is Ian, myself, and Mike Dibb, travel through Las Urdes, through the Residencia de Estudiantes, which is the school where Buñuel, Dali, and Lorca all met, and other places. The film includes interviews with 2 legendary filmmaker, Carlos Saura, and with some scholars like Roman Gubern, who have written lots of books about Spanish cinema. But apart from these interviews, and of course, an interview with Ian, what we have is we're intercutting black and white footage from Buñuel's documentary, which you'll see identified by the voice, and extracts from some documentaries that Mike Dibb made in the 70s and 80s. Now, I'll be with you during the film, throughout the film. My voice will be with you to describe the images, but also to give you inside information about certain moments. Lots of voices speak in Spanish, so I've organized a whole cast of voices to read out or act out, if you like, the English subtitles. So those are kind of audio subtitles by different voices. Together, we build a portrait of Ian Gibson, or we try to. Ian Gibson has spent his life unearthing the recent memory of Spain by building portraits of some of his key artists. Our job here is to try and get something of a portrait of him. The journey ends in Granada, where, after a 50-year-long search, Ian Gibson is closer than ever to finding Lorca's remains in an attempt to bring reconciliation to a country that still refuses to make peace with its past. We started shooting the film in 2013. We only managed to premiere it 10 years later in 2023, after the initial shoot, and having taken a year to edit down the 50 hours of footage into a final 1-hour cut in between classes at the University of Roehampton. Something happened that led us to have to almost start all over again. This will be explained in the film. That was, if you like, the first of many deaths of Where Memory Ends over almost a decade. Sadly, Carlos Saura passed away in early 2023 as we were premiering the film, and 2 other participants as well. The completion of the film has also been halted by the birth of my 2 children and changes of jobs and countries. But a film about one man's perseverance and lifetime passion cannot be given up so easily. So 3 years after all this, we went to Granada to travel with Ian and try and finish the film where it all started for him. Ian, allowed us to use never seen before footage of an interview of him and Lorca's gravedigger, where they locate the precise spot where the poet was buried, even though we haven't been able to find exactly his remains. And then finally, Ian will show us his archive, which he calls his grave. Unlike the mass graves, where thousands of people assassinated by the Franco regime lie, Ian's grave is not closed, but available for anyone who wishes to continue his lifelong dedication to turning individual and subjective memories into collective and objective history. That's the winding and fascinating road where memory ends and history begins. So now that you know a little bit more about the film, I really hope that you enjoy watching it as much as I did making it.
Thank you so much, Pablo. And now, so everybody has the link and the password, and we will gather again in 1 hour. So at 6:45. Enjoy the screening.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna mute myself. Hey, everyone. I think that more or less everybody finished. I am a little bit emotional and touched. You know why? It's maybe my computer. Because it's my country, of course, and it touches many memories as well for myself. But it was quite an experience, and watching that with my class, with my students in the audio description project, it makes all the difference as well. So I think that we are everybody, yeah. Yeah, Pablo, I don't know, maybe he's...
Yes. In a second, I'm going to connect the microphone.
Okay. I just wanted to say, Pablo, congratulations on this work of love, as you described it at the very end. It is very obvious that it was made with lots of love and lots of dedication on your part and on the cast and the crew. And congratulations on the audio description, because it was amazing. I had so many comments. I will start by sharing with the audience something that I shared with you, Pablo, 2 days ago, about the intimacy and the personal touch that you gave to the credits. The credits is something that is sometimes it's not even audio described. We don't pay attention. We go away from the movie theater, and it's the most important part, right? At the same time. So it's a contradiction. And you did such a quite a creative and personal audio description of that I was very moved. And I love it. I love the way you did it, because normally something very boring, and you just made it so special. So I just wanted to comment on the creative turn that you took on the credits. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Thank you, Maria Jose. It's difficult for me to get any perspective from this, because it's just kind of been with me for so long. You know, like I said, it's a project that's taken me 10 years, longer than I have my children, you know, longer than I've been in Spain, back from the UK. It's just been with me for a very, very long time, because it was very difficult to get it off the ground. The idea was there, Ian was there, the first shoot was there, but there was never funding for it. So only towards the end of the 10 years, we finally found the producer who would help us, who would fund it. and then came the rest of the difficulties as well to make it accessible. But it always felt it's almost like I spent 10 years trying to complete it, and now I don't want to let it go because it's almost been like part of me, and I feel like it's a student of mine who's PhD student who's working on a film as a director of access was telling me that for filmmakers who apply access in this way, filmmaking is almost like gardening. You know, you see it grow and grow, so go somewhere else, and you never know when it's finished, really, because the original version itself needs to keep changing to go to a platform and then to go to TV or whatever. You know, you keep altering things. There's never quite only an original version. Then you work on the access, and then if you work creatively, then you create something else. But all along, it's always been a project that has involved people who've worked not for money on it, which means that it felt odd first to have credits that just listed people without kind of spending some time on them, and then it also felt very odd when I was sent the first audio description to be read by someone else. I don't want this to sound like, or you know, it has to have my imprint all over it. It wasn't meant like that. It's just meant that for something that is a personal journey, then it felt a little bit more, it made more sense for me to describe it. So that's why we went for this kind of version. And so that's, I hope, kind of it's added something. Also, in the original version, when we had the screenings in different cinemas, there was also always a discussion, a Q&A at the end, and different things about how the project was made or not made, and the deaths of the project. All these issues were part of the experience. So I thought, why not put some of that experience as well for whoever's going to watch the audio described version? In a way, it's something else. It's not the original version, and I'm keen to present access as transformation, access as creation. So if you want to watch an accessible version, why not give you something else? If I only give you a description of the images, then I'm treating people who may be blind as people who only need to see what I'm seeing. You know what I mean? And it's almost like I'm putting a ramp, and I'm not transforming it. And I feel that if you think about people who need access to images, then why not provide an experience with whatever added element you think you may give? As a result, I heard from a few people who watched the audio described version that they said, well, if I could choose, I may actually choose the version with the audio description because it gives me something else, you know? So I thought, why not do that? There's always this underlying theme for standard access, which sits not very comfortably with me. If all I do is describe sounds for deaf people and images for blind people, in a way, I'm almost telling them, wouldn't you rather really watch the original if you could and hear the original if you could? Which in a way leads me to thinking, wouldn't you rather be normal, you know? And it really sits uncomfortably with me. So I think I would like to see filmmakers who just treat their access versions as one more chance to create. So when you ask me about this, and I told you the only audio described version I have is a conventional one, which is what the distributor has kind of forced me to do. Then I thought, let's take these 2 weeks and do something else. And when I was doing that, you know, successfully or unsuccessfully, it felt like a creative process. So I was describing, and then the dubbing, the editor, the sound editor was telling me, Pablo, it sounds like you're reading. It sounds like you don't feel it. Try and do something else. And of course, I'm not an actor, you know. So you need to find a balance between what you can possibly do, what you can try to do, and also try to still be yourself. But it felt like you were trying to do something there, you know, trying to put yourself in there, trying not to read, trying to feel what you're saying. In the scene about on the cliff, try to add something there, try to create some sort of, you know, try to add the right words so that it maybe adds to the little suspense that we try to almost fake there. Because after all, documentary is, you know, you don't wait for the goat to fall, right? You create things as well. So add to that creation, and it was fun, and it felt a little bit more right than what it would have felt to just provide a normal description, if that makes sense.
Right. I'm reading some of the comments. I don't know if Elaine wants to say something, or should I read it? Or I'm sure that you want to comment on.
Sure, I'll speak. I'm not sure. I wrote a lot. I'm not sure which comment you're referring to, but I guess, Pablo, kudos to you, because I actually thought it was a phenomenal job. I've had many conversations with people trying to have quote unquote accessible events where a film is, for example, being shown in like with captions and open description all at the same time. And like, so there's multiple levels of things that we're seeing and watching and listening to. And it's really difficult because I think sometimes people's heads explode. But you seem to do it really very, very fluidly and really well. And I mean, obviously it kind of, it went with the pacing of the film, that there was time to kind of, I don't know, the pacing of the film, the voicing when you read the subtitles, or the captions rather, right? The talk through it, it all really kind of blended very well. And I loved hearing your voice. I think you actually do have a very nice voice to listen to.
Thank you very much.
And if I might, while I have the floor, I just have to say that the descriptions you gave, I know there were there were many of them, but there were a few I actually had to write down because they were really beautiful and I wanted to remember them. Like the description of the ants coming out of the hand, that I'm sorry for, I actually am probably paraphrasing you, but something like a volcanic eruption of bleeding ants instead of lava. I just thought it was perfect, and it really was very descriptive, right? And also some of the, I think the subjectivity of emotion that you described, that we wouldn't necessarily know or see just from seeing kind of the character from the side or what they were saying, articulating it themselves. And I, for one, was very appreciative of that, as someone who doesn't necessarily then know the history as well as you do, obviously. Yeah, I mean, so much I could go on, but I won't hog the mic.
Can I just say, can I give the credit to those descriptions to Louise Fryer? So Louise Fryer is a wonderful audio describer. She used to be a BBC radio presenter, and then she kind of almost pioneered audio description in the UK and very much in Europe as well. She started off, like most of us, with kind of standard access, creating standard access, sometimes delivering it as well. And since then, she's moved with me and many other people into, let's call it, alternative ways of access. Sometimes we call it creative access, but this sometimes rubs people the wrong way, because a lot of people who are working on access, even if it's by the guidelines, they obviously say, yeah, but we also do creative work. So let's just call it non-conventional, alternative type of access. And she's doing a lot of work on that. She's written a great book as well about that, theatre and for film. So when we started working on this, she provided the descriptions. She has beautiful English. You know, my English obviously is non-native, and I always felt that when it comes to audio description, my non-nativeness really shows there. It's very difficult for me, even if I've spent a long time in the UK, to come up with what I really want to say and make it sound like I want to say. So it was a combination there. And then when she gave me the first description, which was beautiful, but it was not personal, then I tried to, with her, add the personal touch, so to speak, and turn it into what she called audio description / director's commentary, whatever you want to call it, right? Somewhere in between director's commentary and audio description. I feel like it's kind of, well, can I accompany you on the journey that we all took, basically? And there's a few things that felt annoying for me, because I thought if it's transformative access, what I'm after, and by transformation, what I mean is, I feel that conventional access is kind of conservative access. And there is something that someone told me once. They said, we're all been obsessed for the last years with objectivity and accuracy. And I have even come up with measures to assess the accuracy of live captions, and they're almost like quantitative measures. And someone said, this obsession with accuracy, it's really an obsession with the status quo, with maintaining the status quo, with maintaining life as it is, because you want us to access your reality, accurate as it is, but you have no intention of changing that reality. And if that reality is excluding us, and all you give us is a ramp to that reality, yes, we access it, but you don't change the conditions that exclude us in the first place. So for me, access needs to be transformative and needs to transform the piece that we're working on, so that it becomes something else. And in doing that, we try to promote a way of changing filmmaking as well. So I really wanted the film to change even more, but I had some constraints. So I'm facing the reality of being a no-budget filmmaker who is suddenly in the hands of a distributor who owns the film. So because I am not a freelance, therefore I cannot be the producer of the film. Someone else is the producer. Someone else, stands up and gets the awards if there are any, and they call the shots. And they said, sorry, the editing's been done. If you add length to the shots to describe something, then that means we have to color correct things again, and we cannot go to the lab because there's no money. So the only way in which I could stretch the film was in black. So that's why when Ian stops reciting in minute 50 or so, then I add my little story about how the film was going to end there. But I could only do it there because by adding seconds to the black screen, I'm not altering the color correction, and we don't have to go back to the editing room, which is so expensive. So it's really annoying that that's the only place in which I could stretch it, but at least we tried. So really, you want to do something theoretically speaking, but then you're up against the reality of an industry that is, based on what it is, and you don't have the money to do it. But we're trying. But in doing that, Elaine, sometimes I felt, I don't have time. If only I could talk to the filmmaker and tell him to stretch the shots. So, for example, we move on from the priest to the scene in which we talk about Buñuel and his trying to be aware of the moment in which he dies. Now, little photograph, not important, but a photograph of Buñuel carrying a cross, I couldn't describe that because I didn't have time. I have to introduce the characters. But I felt that then when I watched it again, I thought, but since I am actually mentioning that the father, the priest who was there, died, and may he rest in peace, then at least there's a comment about death there, and that suddenly links to Buñuel's comment about his own death. So in adding the commentary, sometimes you add little links that you never thought of, which could make up for the fact that you cannot describe other images. So new links are created.
Yeah, thank you for that. I that's a really great point. That the sighted or only sighted audience wouldn't know that the priest had just died after you'd done the work and been interviewed. I don't think that was content they would have known otherwise, right?
Not at all. Exactly. And the idea is, why not this? Since it's taken us so long to come up with the audio description, why not give it the benefit of the perspective from now? Because this is a story of people who have been working with us. Some of them are no longer with us. You may just know that if we add it to the credits, but in a very cold way in between brackets, rest in peace. But I think it's nicer to know how things have changed or moved on since then as well, since this is an ongoing pursuit. I mean, Ian has not found Lorca's remains. We are not closer to getting the help that we need to find the 150,000 people who are still buried on the sides of the roads. So this is still ongoing work.
I saw a hand raised. I think it's Marta Villa. Maybe she wants to make a comment.
Yes. Hi, Maria Jose.
Hi, Marta. How are you?
Fine. Thank you for inviting me. And this has been really, really interesting. It's just, I want to thank Pablo for the description. I'm totally blind, so I could really follow. And very interesting comments that you have made. Just like that scene where, the mountain, when the cliff, when you were describing the clouds, right? Because of course I'm totally blind with light perception, but everything else, let's say, imagine no color or other, just the fact that you were describing the clouds like in waves. I've been to the ocean, so I can just picture that, right? And then they gather in bunches and right below. So that's perfect description. So I really thank you for this. It was a really nice, very nice documentary, and I'm glad to participate here today.
Thank you, Martha.
Thank you very much. It's great to have your input. Thank you very much.
But just one other question. I was thinking of Charlie Chaplin. No, I don't know, doing a documentary like comparing both. How would that sound? I mean, I don't know, because Chaplin was kind of in a way, he was kind of like you said in the documentary, a dictator at the kind of that personality. Would that be similar to Buñuel's in a way, or really not?
Oh, that's super interesting. You mean the comparison between both figures, right?
Right, just to the same
That's
kind
very interesting because precisely the student that I was referring to, what he was doing is he's director of access in this documentary that came out last year about Charles Chaplin. It's called, what was it called? The Real Chaplin. It's both funded by Showtime in America and in the UK, and it has complete access to Chaplin's records. And it's a take on him as a person and as a filmmaker. And it talks about, you know, the dark and the bright side of Charles Chaplin, if you like. I think because the family is heavily invested in the film, there's only so much dark side that they can cover. And you'll be able to see it. But there is, I think there are similarities there. Buñuel,
yeah.
yeah, Buñuel was, from what I've seen, I mean, Ian Gibson is very much frustrated by the fact that he couldn't finish his biography of Buñuel like he did finish, unlike what happened with Lorca and Dali, which he finished. Ian Gibson had funding, but it was removed from him by the kind of Popular Party, by the Conservative government. So he could only get up to Las Urdes. He couldn't cover in his biography all the rest of the work that Buñuel did in Mexico, in France, etc. So most of what I read for this film was up to there. And so you got, exactly. So then, and that's part of the story that we're telling, because in Spain, Ian Gibson is a very well-known figure. And most people think that he's kind of well-off and rich. But this are different times, like people no longer buy long biographies. And Ian, in order to finish the only first part of his Buñuel book, had to sell half of his already small flat in Madrid, and now lives in a smaller flat. Very happy to work in his box room, as he said, but it's this tiny room, you know, it's a completely, and this is a person who, whenever he speaks, he's on the news because he's very well known. But in terms of, as he always says, you know, people may think that I'm rich, but I'm struggling, and that's the story. So we couldn't cover the rest of Buñuel's life, but I do believe that a lot of Buñuel's important elements may be found in his childhood. And there we see some of what you're saying. We see that he was quite a very determined person. He was determined to find his art. When Lorca and Dali had found it already in this high school that they were studying together, Buñuel was still looking until he found film. He had very clear ideas about what he wanted to do. And you can see it almost like a metaphor in the very first scene of his very first film, which is still massive, because it's when that eye was cut, and you can see that, you know, he is himself showing himself in the first scene of his first film as a barber, as a hairdresser, with a razor, cutting someone's eye as the cloud cuts the moon. So that's the way he enters the world of film. This is someone who has very clear ideas about what he wants to do. But I do believe that this harshness, this toughness, it's, as Ian says, on the outside. I think on the inside, yes, it's a show. It's a bit of a show. And to be honest, there is something about sexual insecurity, something about knowing, about running away from homosexuality, for example. Being very angry with Lorca when he found out that Lorca was homosexual. Doing Un Chien Andalou, and you know, the Andalusian dog, and the dog was Lorca. So the dog was Lorca. They were really going against him and against Lorca's what they called romantic, you know, niceties with the moon and stuff. They wanted to be harsher than that. But deep down, I think deep down, he was much softer than that. Buñuel's brother was gay, and he was never mentioned in his autobiography, you know. And so all these things are people who have really not come to terms with certain elements that would be very important. But I have to say something else here. Ian Gibson's brother himself was gay, and Ian, he says in his latest book, which just came out a week ago, he says, "I never held my brother in Ireland back in the days where he was gay and he was having a really hard time. I ran away from that. and running into Lorca's hands, devoting my life to studying and trying to recover the memory of Lorca, in a way, is my way of trying to come to terms and understand homosexuality. Now, there's a scene where he says that, but we put it in the Spanish version. I've not been allowed to add it to this version yet. I'm hoping that I will. But he mentions that there is only a little comment in passing that Mike Dibb says in the film that you've just watched. And he says, why did Ian Gibson study Lorca and Spain and not France? Was it because of this or that? Was it because of his relationship with his brother? That's it. That's what it was, And so, it all comes down to people who lived in a different era, if you like, different century, where homosexuality was not as out in the open as it was now, and how they dealt or didn't deal with that explains a lot of what we're seeing. I don't know about Chaplin so much. I know Buñuel could be tough, but
I just found kind of a similarity, but maybe it's not, but because of that, the exterior, the tough exterior, the way he was with his family.
Exactly.
But I just want to take all the floor. I just want to say the Spanish version is audio described as well, right? Because I'm Spanish speaking, so you have a.
We still don't have it. So now we have to turn what we've done, because I don't even want to show the traditional audio description with somebody's voice that I have never met and all these things. So we are going to work. We're going to work on the Spanish version, which means that similar description by me, but then we'll have to reverse the voicing. So now all the voicing in English will be turned into Spanish.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem at all.
I think Rogelio has a comment. He wants to speak. Dr. Zapata, you have the floor.
Yeah, I remember that a few years ago I read the book by autobiography by Buñuel, where he explained precisely the cut of the eye, where apparently when he was, I think, if I remember, he said he was 10 years old when he used to watch with his little friends his aunt taking a bath outside of the house. And during those days, women used to wear a kind of long needle in their hairdo, and she was naked. And when these kids start watching her, she took her long needle and pushed into the little hole. And he said that at that very moment, he thought that he was going to lose his eyesight. He was able to take his head out of the, and apparently that kind of traumatic image that he remembered of that particular action, he reproduces in his Chant Andalou.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
The other thing which really I wanted to ask you is that very recently, actually, young Gibson have written his biography, his autobiography, with the title of Un Carmen Granada, no?
Yes.
And one of the things that I like about this film that you made is the constant tension that is in the movie between finding truth, but also the possibility that the search for truth is still impregnated with fiction, that truth is a process of digging, and that one of the big obstacles to find truth is precisely that truth is always truth in time, like memory is always memory in time. So in the film, and I think you make almost like a statement out of this idea of how even when you dig, and Gibson digs all those books and places and interview people, truth is still is something extremely slippery, and with the probability that at the very end, there is always the risk that the official story becomes the official history,
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. This is what really fascinated me about the work of Ian, because, you know how we, whenever we went to Granada, for example, we couldn't really walk for 5 minutes until someone would stop Ian dead on his tracks and give him information. Ian, do you really know how Lorca died? And I would be thinking, well, if anybody knows. But then, of course, then they would stop him and give him new clues, because I know someone who knows someone who was there and this happened. And Ian inevitably would take out his green pen, verde que te quiero verde, his green pen, and start taking notes. And then he needs to then go back home and start pulling those threads until he finds whatever it is that he's looking for. And verifying, fact checking all the insight that he's getting. And that's why he told me, Pablo, I think at my age, I need to this is going to be my last trip to Granada, because I just cannot keep working like this. It's because he needs to take all those testimonies, which are really subjective stories, and then find if there's any truth, if you like, whatever truth means, and then turn those stories into history, right? Which historias and historia, the same word in Spanish, yeah, maybe with or without a capital letter. But that's where he works, in this space where memory ends, hence the title of the film, and history begins. And it's a very slippery, vague, it's very difficult to pinpoint, to work in that area, really. And of course, this reminds me of a film called Stories We Tell, which I think is a fantastic film by the Canadian director Sarah Polley, and she works also on memory, her own memory, and you see clearly how difficult. That's why it's fascinating for filmmakers, because it's so difficult to work with memories and try to come with some sort of truth out of it. What matters, what happened, or how we remember what happened? So it's always so tricky. So I think for Ian, this is a very tiring task, and that's why he's told me that he's done with history work, because you need memory and energy to pull all those threads. And if you're talking about memories in fiction, one of the things that drew Ian crazy was Buñuel's autobiography. It's a great piece of work, of art, if you like. I loved it, but for Ian, it's a nightmare, because nothing checks. He checks things, and they didn't happen in the way that Buñuel said that they happened, and they didn't happen when or where Buñuel said that they happened, because Buñuel is playing with us, is making some sort of fiction, as Dali has often done as well. So it's so difficult for someone like Ian to deal with that kind of slippery ground. But yeah, for filmmaking, for art, it's fascinating. Absolutely.
Good.
Can I just draw attention to Elaine's comment? Elaine, thank you very much. You're absolutely right. You're saying that even though it's difficult or impossible to extend film and everything, and there are constraints, there's historic footage of mass graves and skeletons that have been shown, and that's powerful to see, but it wasn't described. And it's not enough that it may be described in the audio introduction. It's not enough. I think that we may just have to break even more conventions, and if describing that means that some dialogue is not heard, maybe so be it. I agree with you. For Ian, writing that first book and finding those skeletons and skulls and everything was particularly important, because of his being able to show with evidence that those bodies were there. So this is important, and Ian actually had to do that undercover. I mean, there's stories of him kind of coming into the country under with a different identity. He was pretending that he was a French professor. Then he got someone else to distract one of the guards, and he jumped a wall to go in there and take some pictures that he was not allowed to take. So his work has always been a little bit like that, and finding those photographs for him was particularly important. So yes, we'll make a point of adding that, because like I said, it's still an open kind of piece of work, and I'm going to add that definitely. Thank you, Elaine.
Is there any other comment on the documentary itself, on the description? If not, I have questions, but I don't know. I'm going to give the opportunity to the students. And
I have a question.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much. It was really a great experience. My question is about just to check and see if the sort of the impression that I got matches the intention that you had when deciding the technique, and that is specifically about a couple of things. But one is the choice of voiceover instead of dubbing. If that was a specific decision. And another one was in some cases I like very much that the audio description had technical elements about filmmaking, like if it was a caption, or if it was like in some cases fade to black. In other cases, no, just it was an interpretation of blackness, like, and then nothing else happened or something like that. So I wonder if that was just because of time constrictions, or it was because it was a decision, specific decision.
Thank you, Raul. That's a brilliant question. Dubbing, well, we didn't have the money to be able to dub this. We don't have the funds to be able to have enough voices to be able to dub. Then the convention goes that normally you read the audio subtitles, but you still hear the originals. There's something that I'm not convinced about, which was I couldn't have enough voices. So what I could only afford to have a voice for most of the Spanish people, then a voice for Ian, of course, and then maybe a female voice. The voice for the Spanish people is the one that I'm not sure about, because the convention goes that when you voice Spanish people, not dub, yeah, because we established that we cannot do that. When you voice Spanish people, the convention is you voice Spanish people into English with a Spanish accent. Now, a few Spanish people who've seen the version that you just watched were complaining. They were saying, oh, come on, Spanish accent is too thick. It's too much. It draws me really away from the film. So it's very important for me to know if for non-Spanish ears, it's so thick, the accent is so thick that you might as well you say, no, please just give me an English accent, English speaking accent, wherever that is from. So that's one of the questions. I am not sure about that. Then the second voice, which was important for me, the most important one, was who was going to voice Ian. Of course, I would have liked Ian to voice himself. But, I've asked so much of Ian over the years, poor man, that, he's climbed up the cliff, even there. I didn't want him to. And now when he looks at that scene, he tells me, Pablo, there's no way I would do that now. There's no way, It was already 150 years between Mike and me there. But now there's no way I would do that. So what I did is I looked for someone who was English, Jonathan Meller, a brilliant actor. And when I spoke with him, unlike the other that I tried, who just gave me quotes, very expensive quotes, and then wanted to know what the project was about, Jonathan never asked me about the quote. What he did was, oh, wow, I love Ian, I love this. And then the more I got to know him over the phone, the more I realized that there's so much in common between Jonathan and Ian. As British people who now live in Spain, have done so for many years, who are enjoying the good, positive aspects of life in Spain, but suffering also the most negative aspects, like, for example, a messier working conditions and things like that, right? Frustrated by that. But both of them told me the same thing. Jonathan told me, at least being in Spain has helped me to be freer from the British constraints of British life at the time where they were young. So for him to share that with Ian meant that he was not really acting. He was being Ian, and in being Ian, he was being himself as well. That's why I am happy with the work that he's done, because I know that he's invested in this, right? The other voices, I'm not sure. And then, so that's part of the question that you were asking. And then the other one, Raul, which I wanted to address as well. What was the last part that you mentioned?
Simply that there
the
were
filmmaking, yeah. Well, see, Raul,
ways of describing blackouts.
This is very interesting, Raul, because Luis Fryer, who's also a researcher, he did with me about 7 years ago, a work of audio description and then reception. And what we did is we presented a standard audio description and one which we called cinematic audio description that included cinematic terms, filmmaking terms. And we wanted to ask the audience, because in guidelines, normally you have explicit rules not to mention any cinematic tools, because it's meant to draw the audience away from the film, from the fiction. But we thought, yeah, but at the same time, it gives you something else. So I'm not sure. Those are very sighted conventions, you know what I mean? Like from a sighted point of view. So we wanted to test that. And the results are always that, you know, maybe it's not such a problem, you know? So I thought, okay, since I'm already talking about part of a filmmaking process, why not add here and there some of those elements, except for moments in which you really don't want them to be thinking about devices. So sometimes you just want to know that it's black, you know? I would think anyway, but it's difficult to find the balance. So the idea is, let's not get away from or always steer clear of mentioning filmmaking, because I think it's important, but maybe sometimes you may want to not distract. So I think it's for anyone to find the balance, really, knowing that there's no right or wrong answer yet.
Thank
I
you.
just want to make a very quick comment before giving the floor to Alexis and then Nefertiti, who have they raised their hands. But commenting on the accent of the Spanish characters, I read some comments and I agree from Colleen that says that it gave them authenticity. And I agree on that. Like when you were doing the voiceover of Carlos Saura or any of the Spanish speakers, the accent for me was fine. It didn't throw me off at all. I thought it was authentic. And of course, there is a contrast when they are talking and when Ian doesn't have any accent, obviously, is talking. So to me, it was fine. And I think that it gives a layer of authenticity, and I agree with Colleen on that. So Alexis is first, and then Nefertiti. Alexis, you have a comment or a question?
Hi. First of all, great audio description. I really enjoyed it. I consume audio description frequently as a blind person, and conventional description is okay, I guess, but I really like the sorry, voiceover's going off. I really enjoy the personal touch that you gave it, because I think it's also really important. I know there is something that's supposed to be objective with audio description, but I do think that when adding subjectivity to the audio description, it adds a personal touch in general. And depending on who performs it as well, I have heard audio description that I will describe as having no life. Personally, and yours had a lot of emotion to it, and I really appreciated it. It was emotional without being super distracting, and it was very engaging. And I think the uniqueness of this kind of audio description is great, and I would hope that in future it goes this way, because I think it would be great, because audio description is art, and personally it has helped my writing. I'm an author, and it has helped my writing tremendously. So I would love for audio description to become a lot more more artistic. And I guess my question would be, when you in your future, do you plan to do more similar audio description to this?
Thank you very much for your comments. It's great to hear from someone who's used to watching audio script films. The future is a tricky one, because like I said, if it's going to take 10 years to make every film, then really there's not a lot in me, right? So I'm going to have to speed up these processes. I was thinking about going back to my short films and well, first of all, you know, like a short documentary about blindness, and I look back on it and I'm thinking, you know, there are some ableist elements there which are very interesting. I wouldn't think about, you know, making the film maybe in the same way. The description was maybe a little bit cold. So going back to that and looking into it, it's very important for me. Also working on on other people's films, and working on them or with them as well, with directors who want to, you know, put their voices into them as well. Now, the objectivity is something that really matters to me, because I feel that, you know, I heard from a few deaf and blind friends who were saying, if things are very pretendedly supposed to be objective, then it sits sometimes uncomfortably with some of those views, because it's almost like you cannot question it. You don't know who is it coming from. There's no authorship, there's no name or face, and it's almost like the voice of God, you know. So who's going to question that? And you know, that's unfair, because it's not a voice of God. It's someone who has, you know, described it from their very subjective point of view, which is always going to be subjective. You know, there's this Argentinian film where they say, Federico Lupi says, the only objective thing are the objects, right? Humans are not. So then why pretend? Yeah, well, pretend because we are used to giving blind and deaf people sometimes what we think is objective, and then that's it. Take it, you know, don't question it. but I'd like people to question my audio description because they may not agree with it in the same way that they may not agree with the way I've approached this film as a filmmaker. But, you know, the successes and failures are the same for the filmmaker and for my audio description. It's me having a go and maybe failing or not. So I think I don't mean to say that all descriptions need to be done by filmmakers themselves, but being subjective, I like that. I think that's more of the way to go. And the more we do that, the more we will explore and we'll realize that Access is an artistic tool to be, you know, played with and to, and the more we do that as well, the more we'll understand that there are different audiences out there that, you know, we should be catering for. So yeah, thank you very much. And I think this idea of objectivity, we really need to keep thinking about it. And I mean, just look at the guidelines, annexes, look at the guidelines for captioning and for the description. It's all about objectivity, really.
Thank you so much. Nefertiti, you are next.
Hola, hola, gracias.
Hola. Glad to know that you are there.
I'm really happy to be here. I got here a little late, but I caught up. I'm very happy. Pablo, hola, un honor estar aquí contigo. It's an honor to be here with you.
Thank you very much.
Oh my goodness. So I am first and foremost a consumer of audio description, being a blind person myself. And I am also a professional in this space. And oh my gosh, I have so much to say. I know that the people that Ian, the three artists that Ian has written books about and all that, like he referred to them as brilliant, but I think Ian is brilliant and I think you are brilliant. I think this is a masterful work, and I agree with, who was it that said it? Someone in the chat said that when audio description, you know, when somebody is part of the audio description, part of the film, it comes from that feeling. It's really just a whole other dimension that we really don't see, as you were saying, in the more objective kind of audio description. Now, don't get me wrong, I am somebody who feels like, don't tell me what to feel, give me the facts and let me get to it. But when knowing that this is from you, a labor of love, as you say, and hearing you speak in the first person, like it was so engrossing to me. Everything from that thing about the ants being volcanoing out of the hand creeped me out. The donkey with the bee stings hurt my heart. The oh my God, so many moments. When Ian, I believe it was, drops his camera and it goes to black, I literally went like, oh my God, that this is it. And then you came back and I had a huge grin on my face. I mean, I've not been that into a film in a very long time. And I think it has everything to do with your approach. Yeah. I do love that you talked about certain camera things, as one of the participants talked about. I don't think that happens enough. So I really appreciated knowing what was going on in the map, like tracing your trajectory. I loved hearing all about the different colors. I mean, I think this was absolutely brilliant. And I don't, like, I was trying to find a flaw. That's just how my brain works. Like, let me pick at this. And I really couldn't. I understand there were like certain bits that the audio description couldn't get in. I think the example of the skeletons was mentioned. And I mean, it's important, right? If you see it, then I want to know it, right? Like that's an ethos for me. But it did not take me, nothing about this took me out of the film. Quite the contrary. I feel like my mind is blown in a really good way. So thank you so much. Felicidades, brillante. And this should be like on PBS or Netflix or somewhere, because wow, amazing.
Nefertiti, thank you very much. And got goosebumps. It's very important for me to hear the good and the bad things about it, but especially, you know, we just wanted to create a bit of an experience, you know, and if it has come to you in that way, this is brilliant. There are flaws, I'm sure. You know, one of the things that I forgot was, and this morning I kind of woke up and I thought, oh my God, we never added a description of Ian. Ian is not described physically speaking because we wanted Ian to describe himself. And I did send an email to him, but obviously I'm not in Madrid. So I had to send, you know, like ask a friend to go to his house and record. And I would have liked to have Ian describe himself. And that never happened. And then we never described him either. So, I mean, you get enough of him to know we build a portrait of him, but physically speaking, we never. Right?
I don't, you know, I don't feel like I missed out. And usually, yes, I am of the school that wants to know skin color. I want to know like defining features of a person. And yet I didn't feel that I missed out on anything here.
Well, to be honest, he's someone who is not given to, you know, like to be made a portrait of, because, you know, this film, when we went to Las Urdes, Ian was convinced that the film was about Buñuel. It was only in the last day of our trip to Las Urdes that I thought, oh God, I mean, I'm interested in Buñuel, but I really like to make a film about Ian. But I mean, how do you make a film about the guy who's making stories about other people? So then I said to him, Ian, what do you think if I have an interview with you? And he said, why? And I said, well, maybe we can add a layer about you, Ian. And he was not really convinced. I think there's this shyness about, you know, and I said, okay, give us just an hour. And he said, okay, let's go to my flat. And then we spent 6 hours interviewing him. So I thought, well, by now he must have gotten the idea that the film is also about him. And he kind of agreed, and that was that. But we were very aware that we would never be able to make a conventional kind of film about him, really. It was only through his work, and then finally maybe turning the camera towards him towards the end of the film. And I have to say, there was one time where we were offered money for the film, which was TVE, the main broadcaster, said, Pablo, if you make this, you know, Ian is an important figure. We don't have a film about him. So if you make a traditional documentary about him, we'll play it in our series of Los Imprescindibles, and you can get your whatever money, you know, 50,000 euro, which would have been enough for us. But we said, okay, let's have a look. We said yes. They said fine. We signed the contract, and then we found out that what they wanted was a film where Ian, first off as a child, photographs of him, then his wife speaking, then his friends speaking. And I know his wife, this is someone who is not wanting to be on camera, always with us in every trip. But she's not wanting to be on camera. She is a very private person who is super important in Ian's life, super important, but she's always there, sitting at the back. Part of the story that we couldn't tell is, and it's only there when Ian lowers his sight, when he says, I wasn't there for my children, lowers his sight, and we add in the description something about a hint of an apology. Well, this is Ian saying enough there, and she accepted that to be there, but that was it, really. A picture of her, and that sums up what she is like, really. She's always at the back of the auditorium when Ian is speaking, rolling her eyes when Ian is going on for too long, talking about Lorca when he's been asked about something else, always answering about Lorca, because that's his obsession. So we could not make the film that we were asked to make. The only way to approach Ian was laterally, and then maybe get him as close to him as he allowed us to be. That was it.
Yeah.
So then really maybe not having a description of him, this is someone who's just walking away from us all the time, you know? And in the film, at the end of the film, he's also just walking away. So we got as much of a portrait as we could, but maybe a hint of a description about what he's like we can add at the beginning.
Maybe. I feel like it was a portrait
again,
of him through his work.
What do we describe? He asked me, Pablo, what description do you want? My description as I was in the film, or as I am now? Because it's been 12 years, you know?
That's fascinating too. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah,
I still don't feel like I missed out on anything. I was so engrossed, not just with the man, Ian, with his studies, his research, his obsessions, but I think we learn a lot about him through his work, through what his friend said. I forget, but the gentleman who was with him, filming with him.
Yeah.
you know, we hear about his wife, and you know, we know that she's English, and she clearly means everything to him because of how he spoke about her. And when you said that thing about like he looks down with a hint of an apology, usually I would say, don't interpret for me. But I heard that in his voice, how he delivered it. So it was like, yeah, that confirms what I just heard. So I don't know. I do know this was amazing.
With that one, I did feel, oh, am I just saying something that has already been heard? But I just
No, but I think
almost
that's
felt
okay.
it was just so important for me when I was there filming that, and I
Yeah.
saw those eyes going down. I thought,
It's
wow,
such a
okay.
powerful moment. I can, yeah.
Yeah, because it's someone who's
Yeah.
really saying, you know, there's no way I would have been able to do that if someone had not done all the rest of the stuff. So yeah, for us, it was almost like a tribute to Clara, as much as we could have a tribute to her, knowing that she didn't want to be on the film, which is absolutely
Yeah.
fine.
It was beautiful. And I also want to congratulate Louise Fryer.
She's fantastic.
Wow. Amazing script. You delivered it beautifully. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nefertiti. I'll send her this recording because, you know, she's a massive part of obviously of this. She has really a way of describing things. Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to make a quick comment on Nefertiti's also comment about your work, and it's the relationship. Through this audio description, we get a glimpse of your relationship with Ian, Pablo. Because, for example, when you make comments such as, I should have stopped him when he was stepping up the cliff, he was about to fall down.
Yes, that was like foreshadowing, and then the camera whirls, and wow. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was excited.
Yeah.
There was no way. This is a very determined man,
so
and there's a childish element to him. There's a childish kind of excitement. You know, there still has. I mean, British people, the one, you know, if you want to generalize a little bit, you know, they are sometimes not as openly, verbally, physically enthusiastic as Spanish people who are moving our hands all the time. You know, this kind of stereotypes. But Ian there's something about this excitement that he feels when he's just breathing there and saying, this is the most exciting moment of my life or whatever. So there was no way I could stop him from going there. But I'm filming this from a very far away distance with no access to anything. And I'm thinking, God, what if something happens? You know what I mean? I'm going to be responsible for an accident here. But, you know, and I asked him 3 times, but I know, you know, who am I? I mean, this is a 75-year-old person who's very determined to go up there because he needs to touch and feel what he thinks is important I mean, when you are invested for 10 years in writing someone's biography, you almost live in that person's life, and there's a physicality to it. When he was writing about Dali, he had to touch the rocks on the beach that inspired Dali's paintings, and here he had to see that rock on the cliff, climb up there, and he asked to be left alone there for a while. We stopped filming, and he was there for almost 45 minutes. I guess, you know, thinking, well, I've not been able to finish my biography. This is it, but I'm here, you know, I'm sitting here on this cliff.
Yeah.
So
your decision to include that part on the audio description is what fascinated me. When you say, like, Mike is worrying and so am I should have stopped him. So you are sharing with the audience your concern, you know what I mean, your fear that Ian is in danger. So that gives us another layer of relationship between the film director and the characters.
Yeah, and at that point you are you know, from a filmmaking point of view, if it's a filmmaker's hat that you're wearing, you're thinking, whoa, this is an amazing scene. I mean, amazing by my standards, because, you know, we've got the goat that fell, and now we've got our protagonists who are like goats trying to climb. I really hope that the ending is not the same as with the goats, as it's been said in the comment here now that I'm reading. So from a filmmaking point of view, you're excited because documentary has these things. You don't script things, but sometimes things happen, right? And I was thinking, whoa, this is great because I know that Mike is filming this from the cliff, and I'm not seeing what Mike is filming because Mike's got a camera. I'm not seeing what Mike's filming. I am hearing them because they are mic'd. They're shouting at me because they don't realize that they're mic'd. So they're telling me with massive shouts, we're okay. But of course they're shouting in my ear because I've got the earpiece. And I'm hoping that they're going to be fine. And they saying, okay, shall we go up? Shall we go up? And I keep telling them through the mic, no, don't, please don't. But they're pretending that they kind of listen to me. And then later they told me that they could listen to me. They just pretended that they couldn't. So, obviously, who am I to stop them, But yeah, it gave me also an insight into what Ian is like, so trying to convey some of that was, I guess, important as well.
I'm so sorry, but I do have a question. I almost forgot.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
Go ahead.
when you said, Pablo, that your computer, your footage, your hard drive, everything was stolen, I caught my breath, because goodness, what a devastation that must have felt like. How the heck did that happen? And were you able to ever figure out who did it?
No, because they weren't looking for the film. It's not like the film is no one knew about the film. This was just a random kind of random thefts that took place along the corridor where I had my office. So we knew that different offices been broken into, and they took computers away. And along with the computers, they took whatever they found, external hard drives, which most likely the police said they just probably binned them somewhere. They were not interested in the hard drives. But it just goes to show, first, how naive I was and how not professional by not having my external drives in different places. Then secondly, how just chance, it's just complete, bad luck, because no one was looking for that. Obviously, after that, I thought, oh my God, it's taken me so long to bring those 50 hours of footage down to what I thought was a decent 1.5 hour edit, but that's all gone. So funnily enough, all I could do is just try to remember, draw from memory, try to remember, try to remember how I had edited everything. But you remember some bits, but not the micro editing of the scenes.
Yeah.
And plus, I felt so much embarrassment. How am I going to phone Ian after all the work he's put into this and say, sorry, Ian, I lost it all?
Yeah.
It took me, months, literally months to phone him. I told Mike, I told Martina, I got told off nicely, but with Ian, it was very difficult to phone him. And Martina said, well, listen, I've got the 50 hours again, but not edited. So we just start again, But really, and this is the kind of thing that it's not my job. It's not something that I do every day. I do it only on the side, and I have to ask for time. And for a while, I thought, how am I gonna? And it's the kind of thing that weighs on your mind as you go to sleep and you wake up and you're thinking, and people ask every summer as I went back to Spain, people will ask, hey, so how's the film coming along? I'm thinking, oh God, if only you knew. So at the end, what I thought was, it really, what pulled me through this was Ian's work. If this is someone who's persevered for decades, how can you not just persevere for just 1 decade for me? He's been fighting for what he's fighting for like 50, 55 years. And there's something there that is important for us, Nefertiti. What Roman Gubern, the scholar, says at the end? He says, time works against memory.
Yes.
This is what weighed on. I thought, look, we're talking about people who are very close to deaths already, and who are this close as well to finding those relatives, the remains of those relatives that they're looking for, And when that, and if and when that happens, Ian has told me that he's spoken with some of those people who are maybe in their 90s, and they've finally found the remains of their relatives. And you know what happens after they find them? Very often they just died a week, a month later. Almost like you could just let go of everything, But those people, that generation that are still looking and trying to fight for what is their right, they're not going to be there forever, So this is something that we need to really address now. And if we can contribute to it with a film, with a book, wherever, then so be it. Young people are not gonna read a 300-page book, but may they watch a little scene from a documentary? May we, whatever we can do, So I think let's invest, the new generations as well, on something that really, how can a country like Spain have 150,000 people unaccounted for, in mass graves on the sides of the roads? This is not decent.
Yeah, no, I had no idea. And I feel like this documentary too, because you wove in your own perspective and your own narrative into the audio description, we get a lot of tidbits that we otherwise would not have gotten had it been, the more traditional objective audio description. So I've learned so much in so many ways tonight. And yeah, thank you so much. This was very creative and beautifully done.
Thank you,
Nefertiti.
Nefertiti.
Thank you so much.
Before wrapping up, because it's gonna be almost 2 a.m. for you, Pablo, and even though you told me that you didn't want to cut people off and you were so generous and you said, it doesn't matter, Maria Jose, as many questions as there be. I want to ask if there is any other comment or question. And if not, I will pose my one because I want to ask you something. Those personal comments that you incorporate in the audio description, such as the one I shared already, and for example, when you said about Padre Angel, you say something like, may rest in peace, the wonderful Padre Angel, all those impressions, of course, your subjectivity, you could do because you are the film director and you have these connections with the characters. But what recommendations or what advice would you give, for example, to my students or to anyone who is doing audio description and wants to jump into this approach, into this creative alternative audio description? What recommendations, because obviously they are not the film directors, how can they be creative and get a sense of those feelings that you provoke? Because you provoke feelings on Nefertiti, on me, on so many people, and you moved us with your comments. So how can we do that if we are not the film director?
Yeah, this is a very good question. I think, yeah, absolutely. The first thing I'm thinking is, as much as I believe in this type of kind of, call it transformative access, if you like, I need to be very aware that in examples of creative access that I'm seeing, I'm also seeing people who are users, blind, deaf users, and who may say, well, actually, can I just have the standard version, please? So this is very important, just to make sure that we understand that, you know, for all the positives that we see in this types of approaches, then the other one is really important because it needs to be there, and because there's not always the money and the time and the energy or the enthusiasm or whatever to provide creative access. So standard access is super important as well. Now, I still think there's something about this one that makes it more important, not just because of the subjective point of view, but also because in a way, I think it's going to, you know, maybe empower, maybe bring to the fore, you know, the voice, you know, of a lot of people who are users and who are normally not really catered for. So I think there's an empowerment there that is very important. For students, I would say start off with or make sure that you master the description as it is, objective and by the guidelines and everything else. And then, in order to provide this one, I'd say the closer you can work with the filmmakers, the better. That's the first thing. And if there's an opportunity for you to try and either become filmmakers or get familiarized with the making of, it's very important. Now, it doesn't have to be a film. It doesn't have to take 10 years. It could be videos. It could be, you know, a little shorts. It could be, you know, my students are, you know, when they become whatever, you know, little YouTubers or whatever, they make, right? You're producing audiovisual stuff. So why not produce with your means, whatever. And then as you produce and you wear the hat, then you'll find that maybe access takes a second, you know, you send it to a back burner kind of thing, then you incorporate it again, and that's when you start playing. And then if you do have the opportunity to work with makers, filmmakers, theater makers, then the fact that you have had a go at making something means that maybe you can see things from their point of view as well, that you can, you know, speak that language. I think that's kind of the idea. And there's one more element that I missed when I first developed the idea of accessible filmmaking, which is not new, which a lot of people have worked on, and that is, you know, you need the users with you. You need blind and deaf consultants. You know, you need that, and it's not just a box to tick. And in the same way, not any blind person can be a consultant. They can be users, but the fact that they are blind doesn't mean that they're experts in audio description, right? Then, you know, because that's also a little bit ableist thinking, you know, when there's a blind student in my class, she gets asked so many questions about audio description as though she had the ultimate voice on audio description. But, you know, she has one voice and is representative of herself, but no more than mine is representative of sighted people, right? But so we need to be careful with that as well. But if we can work with deaf consultants, with blind consultants, this makes all the difference, I think. Because then there is no way access is not going to be built in the process. It just has to. So I think those are, I would say, then get closer to the making of things, become a maker yourself, and then start looking for people. There are loads of students of beginning filmmakers who don't even know about this, but it's easy to get them excited about it. It really is. Because they see that it's another way of creating, and you can be creating there with them. But be ready as well to give in. It's a give and take. If I think as an audio scribe, if you guys think as an audio scribe that this is the best way of doing it, and the filmmaker says no, this is the best way, and you really don't like it the way, who gets to decide? Luis Fryer or me? I mean, I don't know. It was just this conversation, right? But it's not written anywhere. Who gets to decide? Is it your film, my film? I don't know. But that's the beauty of it as well. So I would say those steps I would try to follow, and also remember that access is just the way we're approaching it here. There's no right and wrong way. So really, it's there's a series of failures. Like filmmaking is a series of crises. People say, well, access is just touch and go. You try and who knows? There's no guidelines.
Thank you so much. I know that Pablo prepared a Google form that he would like, if it's possible, to get some feedback from the audio description, from this alternative description. So we're going to put the form in the chat.
Shall I do it?
Thank you so much, Harley. Yeah. I think it's there, yes.
Just to say that this obviously is very important for us, the feedback. I mean, obviously, I'll have a look at this recording, I'll transcribe. This is, priceless for us, because in the same way that we just, trying and error and all these things, there's really no much feedback yet that we've got about not this, but this approach in general. Yeah. So hearing from you, it's very, very valuable.
Of course. And you invite everyone, right? Sighted, non-sighted, everyone to, you're laughing at the comment by Colleen, right? About the goat. Ian is the goat.
Yeah.
So
Brilliant.
Please tell Ian about this. I'm sure that he will be laughing.
I will.
So I was saying that you are interested in any type, feedback from both sighted and non-sighted users.
Yeah, remember, Maria Jose, that what we're saying here is that if we go for this kind of approach, then ideally we'll make these audio scribe versions also relevant for sighted people, which means that more and more sighted people will be familiar with the way blind people consume film. So again, this is bringing those worlds together, as opposed to just keeping it separate, which I don't think is probably the way to go.
About inclusion as well, accessibility, not only as accommodation, right? But as another artistic layer that it provides a lot of emotions to anyone.
Can I just say one more thing? When you were asking about the students, I would really encourage them to see the work of the increasing number of deaf and blind artists who are making films, making documentaries, making fiction, because they make them from their own point of view, and then they make it accessible. So inclusion is normally me, very white, middle-class, privileged person, including blind and deaf people into my products. But the other way around is super interesting. So when you get blind, deaf people making films and then creating their ramps so that we access them, it's great to see that they don't normally go for conventional access. They go for the access that they feel is right for them. And that is super interesting. So I would encourage you. We are creating a database of filmmakers who build access into the products, but also blind, deaf, disabled filmmakers who then create access as well. We'll give you access to that database so that you can explore these people, and but it's an open database, so we'll send it to you.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for this transformative experience. Not only transformative access and audio description, but phenomenal. I think the people on the chat, they are on fire, making comments and praising your work. So thank you so much for your generosity. This is like 2 hours and a half. Unbelievable, Pablo. Eres una máquina. Okay. You are amazing.
No problem. No, don't worry. Thank you very much. It's great to have this experience. It's fantastic. So it's really encouraged me, and I'm sure my team as well, to keep working on this. So, and I have to say, it's amazing to see that you have all this stuff going there, that you guys have all this stuff going on there, because when I am asked, so what about your courses? What do you do? Spanish university is very difficult to change established order. So I don't teach this. I teach interpreting because there's no room for me to do anything else. So seeing how all these things are set up in so many different places and seeing Maria Jose that you keep pushing for this, really, you know, it's very encouraging, very, very encouraging. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your words. And I hope that in the future you can come here in person and work
Yeah, I'm dying
with
to.
Jane,
I will.
with Judy, with Raul, with us in filmmaking, accessible, transformative, alternative filmmaking audio description.
Brilliant. I will do,
Yeah.
Maria Jose. I know
Okay,
that I will
thank
do.
you so much and take care.
Thank
Un
you.
abrazo fuerte.
Wonderful.
Un
Gracias.
aplauso
Muchas
de la
gracias a
clase.
todos. Thank you very much. Thank you.